We're coming up this year on the third Thursday of each quarter. This partnership is a relatively new nonprofit, just over 1 year old. The staff comprised of Emily Cole-Jones, Managing Director, Desiree Roots, Program Director, Bruce Miller, and Phil Whiteway, Senior Advisors. Atlas is an acronym that comes from Allied Theater Legacy Artists and Supporters. Their mission is to recognize and respect, honor, and protect the legacy assets of professional theater in Central Virginia. They're currently exploring 2 slogans: a home for heritage and new horizons, and respecting the past, inspiring the future. Without further ado, I'll turn it over to Emily Cole-Jones.
Can everybody hear me? I have a lapel mic on. Is that sound okay? Yeah. Great. Thank you so much for being here. Welcome. As she said, I'm Emily Cole-Jones. I'm the Managing Director at Atlas. I want to say thanks to our Zoom folks. We do actually have some folks joining us on Zoom. I'm actually going to take a look at this. I think we have somebody on YouTube. Yeah, admit. Okay. Yeah, we've got a handful. Great. So I just want to express so much gratitude to the Henrico County Public Library. They have been so gracious in giving us this space and allowing us to revive, or shall I say recaffeinate, coffee and conversations.
Well done.
This event, this program has been on hiatus for about 10 years. I think the last time it was presented was in 2015. Yeah, a lot of you are nodding. And it was such a great, beloved activity in the community that really brought folks together and shed light on all things theater in Virginia and in Richmond specifically. So we're thrilled to be back here bringing it to you again, and hopefully for many years to come. So Lindsay already introduced the rest of our staff here. Phil, Desiree, her daughter Eliana, who is a volunteer. Gordon Bass is also a volunteer, helped us set up this morning. He's one of our former colleagues at Virginia Rep. And then of course our panelist, Bruce Miller, who's also on our team. Let's see here. Lindsay covered a lot of what was in my notes, so I'm going to skip some. No, that's great. So yes, our topic today is the Platinum Jubilee of professional theater in Greater Richmond, and Platinum refers to the 70th anniversary. We have several theaters that are coming up on major anniversaries this year, last year, and next year. And so very excited to be celebrating all of the work that went into making theater what it is today. We wouldn't be here without the trailblazers that literally, forged the path for the rest of us to follow. So I can't wait to hear what you all have to share. So let me introduce our panelists. Let's see, I've got some notes here. So Bruce Miller, he is our first speaker. We're going to go in order of the founding of each of these theaters that we're talking about today. So Bruce is a senior advisor at Atlas. He is the former artistic director of Barksdale Theatre, Theatre 4, and Virginia Repertory Theatre. And he and Phil Whiteway actually co-founded Theatre 4. And then when that merged with Barksdale, that became Virginia Rep. And he was the artistic director of Barksdale for 11 or 12 years. We're trying to do the math the other day, but a long time. Next we have Brad Armstrong, who is the son of Dottie and Larry Armstrong, who founded Rolfe Players in Chester, Virginia. Brad is just an amazing guy. He's a brilliant marketing guru. He is a former partner at Murden Agency, and he was also the CEO and president of the Virginia Performing Arts Foundation. Steve Murden. So Steve is an archivist at Virginia Museum of Fine Arts, and he is the resident expert on all things Theatre Virginia, Virginia Museum Theatre, and just theater in Richmond in general. Like whenever we have a question or don't know the answer to something, we just call Steve and he knows, and so he's our resource, internal resource for that. And then Charles Bass is here representing Chamberlayne Actors Theatre. He is the president of the board of Chamberlayne Actors Theatre, also known as CAT Theatre. And he is an actor, a director, and also leads the theater department at Atlee High School in Hanover County. So that's our illustrious panel. Can we give them a round of applause? And just a quick note, so I'm sure some of you might be wondering, Why Swift Creek Mill is not represented up here because they were founded in 1964 or 1965, depending on who you talk to. I did ask Tom Witt to join this panel today, but he unfortunately, well, fortunately for him, but unfortunately for us, is in tech right now for Diary of Anne Frank, which is opening soon at the mill. So he sends his regards and his regrets that he couldn't be here with us today, but we will be including the mill in future programming. Just a couple of housekeeping things. If you are on Zoom, come on in.
How are you?
Come on in. There's pastries and coffee and water in the back and tea. If you are on Zoom, please stay muted and use the chat function to ask your questions, or if you can't hear us, please do use the chat. I'm going to be monitoring the chat, hopefully on my phone if I did this right. So if I'm looking down at my screen, I promise I'm not scrolling Facebook. I'm actually trying to manage Zoom meetings. And if you have a cell phone, if you could turn it on silent mode or turn it off, that would be great too, just to minimize interruptions. We will be taking one photograph from the back while the panel is speaking, so if you're uncomfortable having the back of your head photographed, you can feel free to, leave, but I just have to say that as a disclaimer.
What if we only want the back of our head?
No, but we want to respect the library's privacy policy in that way. So I love that we're having to add chairs in the back. This is so incredible. This is great. Phil, Desiree, Bruce, am I forgetting anything else? Any other announcements?
Let's roll.
Let's roll. All right, let's get into it. I'm going to take a seat, and I'm going to let our panelists take it away. They have the remote here to operate the PowerPoint here, which is what our folks on Zoom will also be seeing. So, Bruce, let's start with you.
Great.
Can you please use the mic?
Great. There we go. I want to start very quickly telling you why theater history in Richmond and in Virginia is so important. If anyone told you that the first great theater city in what would become the United States of America was Richmond, Virginia, how many of you would go, yes, I agree with that? Okay, 3, all right. Some people know the story, this is good. You know, the reality is, back in 1609, the third supply was coming to Jamestown from England, and they became shipwrecked in Bermuda, and the story of it was written by the fellow who was the secretary of the Jamestown colony and sent back to England, and it became the basis for Shakespeare's play The Tempest. So Virginia is the only state that has a direct and immediate connection with Shakespeare. Then when the first purpose-built theater was built in the colonies, it was built in Williamsburg in Virginia. When the first recorded performance took place, it took place just outside Onancock in Accomack County on the eastern shore. First after first after first happened here in Virginia. This was not an accident. The first British touring company to come to the United States stopped in Williamsburg first, and then eventually, when they wore out Williamsburg, they went to New York. But our state was populated by the Cavaliers, who were on the side of the king and the crown during the English Civil War. The North was inhabited with Puritans. And the Puritans, one of the things that they will always have to be accountable for is they tore down all the theaters in England. They thought theater was evil made flesh. And it was literally against the law to do a play or attend a play in all of the northern states. So the only place it could become the first theatrical capital of our would-be nation was Virginia. When Thomas Jefferson and George Washington, after the Revolutionary War, said, we need a great Academy of the Arts in our new country, the United States of America, where should we put it? They put it in Richmond, on corner of Broad and 14th, and built the Academy Theatre, which had a terrific reputation for doing great work of national, if not world caliber. And then in 1811, everybody knows, it burned to the ground. And for the next 100 years, there was a century of mourning in Richmond. Now, all of this is the groundwork for what happened in 1953. In 1953, after the century of mourning was over, after Moses Hofheimer's theatrical company at the Empire, now November Theatre, had its 3-year life and then died.
Your mic died. Your mic died.
No, I think it's... All right, we'll see what happens here. In 1953, there was a book written that started the regional theater movement in the United States. And it was called Theater in the Round, and it was owned, one of the copies, by Muriel McCauley from New York City. And Muriel and Pete Kilgore and his first wife, Perky Kilgore, and Pat Sharp, and Tom Carlin, and Stu Falconer, 6 friends in the theater biz from New York, said, we need to follow the advice in this book that said, basically, we need to make theater a national thing and not something that's just in New York. So they came down to Richmond, and Stu Falconer's mother lived out in Chesterfield, and she said, I'm an empty nester, you can all move in with me. So they did, and they looked around for real estate, and they found Hanover Tavern. Now there she is. Okay, this is a picture from 1891. Show the next picture, because that's more what it looked like when they found it. Okay? It was a wreck. And they said, oh no, it's perfect. We can buy it for $25,000 and put down a $2,500 deposit. The last $100 of which was in nickels, dimes, and quarters, no mayonnaise jars. We can buy it and spend our time repairing it, restoring it, and put a theater in the English basement. That was the back. They restored it so it looked like this. Tavern after all the blood, sweat, and tears. And they started the first professional theater of the modern era in Metro Richmond. Everything for the 40 years prior to this was a community theater. And they said, we're not going to be a community theater, we're going to pay all of our people. They paid their actors $1 a performance, which is worth a little more than $1 today. But nonetheless, they had the commitment to start a professional theater way out in Hanover Tavern. One of the first things they found is that nobody wanted to drive out there.
Still don't.
That's not true. Nobody wanted to drive out there unless they served dinner. So they started, and you can look this up, they started the first dinner theater in the United States of America, if not the world. Look up dinner theater, it'll say the very first one, 1953, Barksdale Theatre at Hanover Tavern. Their first theater in the English basement was a proscenium theater, and this actually is the second one because they have fixed seats. The first one, and go ahead to the, who's doing my picture?
I am.
Okay, there we go, all right. Go ahead a little bit more. There. They served dinner in the dining room, and they bought these chairs.
Push your
You're
button.
just pushing the button.
But I'm not.
Project.
There we go. I think the battery's dying is what's happening, but I don't know. Anyway, the first deal is they said, okay, if I through with your dinner, pick up your chair and bring it into the theater. And you sat literally in the same seat, but in different parts of the building. Oh yeah, that's what they did. And they became famous not only for their meals, but for the quality of the productions they did. And the first show was done in 1954. Now in 1953, I sat on August the 1st, I sat on the front porch of Hanover Tavern and put out a notice and said, anybody who wants to come celebrate the purchase of Hanover Tavern on August 1st, the 70th anniversary of it in 2023, come say hi. And we had 5 people who came to say hi. Richmond, because of the recent events, there are a whole lot of new people in charge of a whole lot of things in Richmond. And what is happening is the history that you're going to hear today is starting to disappear. One of the things that Atlas cares about is making sure that that history doesn't disappear. Because one thing we learned in the 40-plus years that we ran Theater 4 and Barksdale and Theater Virginia Rep, was that people start to respect the industry if they know it's been here a long time. Richmond loves its history. Loves it. And if you can connect your art form as we're enjoying it today with that history, then you can get people to say, this is important, we're going to give this money. This is important, we're going to buy tickets. And if they think that it's all an upshot thing that just started relatively recently, they go, yeah, I can take it or leave it. It's not something important. But because Richmond is a treasured theater capital, the stories you will hear today are important. I'm going to pass the mic now to Brad. Oh yeah, after it was converted to 3/4 thrust, that's what it looked like. The dining room is all fancy and schmancy now. This I wanted to put in for my wife's benefit. She's here with us today. She designed the set with a pickup truck on the stage of Hanover Tavern. And if you've ever been there, you realize that the doors are about the size of the door to your bedroom at home. Okay? She went out and, raise your hand, Terry, since I'm bragging about it. She went out and bought a pickup truck at a junkyard and got a
Welder.
blowtorch and cut it apart in pieces. Got it back, got it into the tavern, put it back together, and then we had to cut it apart again. So that's where we are today, is we're slicing up pickup trucks and taking them into the theater of this wonderful, cherished building.
But in Act 2, the truck was hidden behind a...
And Act 2 was hidden behind other parts of
It
the
wasn't in
set.
Act 2.
That's right. Yeah, not only did she have a pickup stage on set, a pickup truck on stage, but it had to disappear. So, anyway, John?
Bruce, I missed it, but what's the origin of the name Barksdale?
It's called Barksdale Theatre. It was originally called Barksdale Memorial Theatre at Hanover Tavern because of a woman named Barbara Barksdale, who was a theater colleague of the founders, and she had MS, and she passed away right before they founded the theater, and her family was from Charlottesville. So they said, we're going to name it after Barbara Barksdale, and they did. And we'll talk more later. Brad.
Well done. You want me to do that?
Oh, yeah, sure.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So I'm Brad Armstrong, and I'm here to give you a glimpse into a theater called the John Rolfe Players, or a theater group called the John Rolfe Players, which my parents founded in 1954.
Can you use the mic, Brad?
Oh, I thought I was. Which my parents founded in 1954. And I love being here because theater's been a big part of my life. My parents were some of the earliest subscribers to Barksdale and to Virginia Museum Theater, and they would drag me along with our one coming up. And eventually, as you know, you just get to loving it. After you've seen it enough, you love it. You don't understand why people aren't thrilled with live theater. They would prefer to watch, something streaming on TV. My parents came from a little town outside Buffalo called East Aurora. And when they moved here in 1950, I guess they moved here in 1954, they were a approached by some of the other folks who lived around town saying, hey, we hear you guys were part of the theater group. We'd love to think about theater for us. And this was Chester, Virginia, the little town of Chester, which is 20 miles south of here. And enough people expressed some interest that my mom and dad decided they would found a new theater company. They called it John Rolfe Players after John Rolfe, the tobacco owner, and you probably know who John Rolfe was. They had a lot of different weird names on there. They picked John Rolfe at the end of the day. This is my mom and dad in their younger years when they were just a little bit after this when they founded the theater. And this is them on their 50th wedding anniversary. And during that time, between those pictures, they were involved in the John Rolfe Players in leadership roles, in acting, in directing, in building sets. So it was quite an investment of time and energy that they made. We lived in a little house in Chester on a little street called LaFawn Road, and we had a basement, a fairly large, unfinished basement, and it was there that the very first meeting of John Rolfe Players happened. There were 32 charter members, and they met in our basement. And in fact, that basement became more than just a meeting room. It was also where they would put on one-act plays and skits and workshops and would do rehearsing for productions that they would then take to other places. They would meet on the first Friday of every month, and they would meet for a little while on business, and they would do whatever plays and creative stuff they wanted to do, and then they would drink and have a wonderful time. And I will tell you that I believe that one of the keys to the longevity of a community players group is people who care about each other. The social connections are terrific, and I credit that as being one of the keys. So I have in front of me a whole series of playbills, starting with 1953. This one right here, this playbill. And interestingly, my mother typed this playbill out on her little Royal typewriter, designed the thing on the back, and then we ran it off on an old mimeograph machine which we had in the back room. And that is what the playbills were for a while, for several years. And this first one was 3 one-act plays put on at Thomasdale High School auditorium. And my mom and dad were not only leading the organization, but mom was directing, and my dad had 2 different roles in the 3 one-act plays. The following year, 1955, had the first significant play that they put on. It's called My Three Angels. Who knows My Three Angels? Everybody knows My Three Angels. It's a fabulous show. And on the left is the playbill from My Three Angels, and on the right was the skit. I don't know if people have ever heard of dramatists play service, but they're the folks that provided the scripts. We had hundreds of these in the basement in our house. Whenever I was looking for something to read, I would pick up one of these and read it. And actually, after a while, it's interesting. When you start, it's not as much. But anyway, dramatists play service were the folks who distributed the scripts, and they would distribute them to non-professional theaters and amateurs at a much lower price. The royalty was better. And they had an arm that specialized in it. And without them, I don't think we could have had the quality of plays that John Rolfe Players had over the years. The graphics of these things changed over and over and over again, but they finally settled on this sort of look with the tragedy comedy hands, and they call themselves Chester's Community Theater. But in the early 80s, the Parks and Rec for Chesterfield County became a co-sponsor. It was 30 years later, but they became a co-sponsor. So you can sort of see that in the 29th season, you can't see it, I guess, but it says co-sponsored by the Chesterfield Department of Parks and Recreation. Who knows what that Latin saying behind the characters is? Anybody know? Well, I didn't know either. For the longest time, I had no idea what it was. But what it means is, let us amuse ourselves. It's a wonderful piece of trivia that anybody involved with John Rolfe Players probably doesn't even know. Let us amuse ourselves. It was cool. And back in the 29th season, almost 30 years later, for this particular series, my mom and dad were still very, very active. My dad had become mostly the stage manager or construction manager for the sets, so they were still involved all those years later. So after 5 years in our basement, my mom had 2 more kids. We just outgrew the space, and they looked around for a place to be. And fortunately, after 5 years, they found the old Sanford's grocery store in Chester that had been abandoned. It was out of business, still owned by Joe Sanford, but it was out of business, and he gave that to them rent-free. They just had to pay for utilities and outfit and fixing it up. And they called it the Cracker Barrel. And the reason they called it the Cracker Barrel was because when they got in there for the first time, there was a huge barrel that was an old Cracker Barrel. And they were trying to decide what to call it. They decided to call it the Cracker Barrel. After 5 years, Joe Sanford had to sell a property. It was worth something, so he sold the property. And they, again, had to go look for a house. Really interestingly, one of the things that they did back in 1961, while they just moved here, they looked at the Swift Creek Mill Playhouse, or Swift Creek Mill, which was open for development, and they looked and evaluated, and at the end of the day decided they just couldn't afford to do it. So thankfully, the mill got some people who had some resources to do it. But it's fascinating to me that they went to the mill, and I actually went with my mom and dad and toured the mill, and it was just a wreck when they were looking at it. It was pretty fun. But so Cracker Barrel was fun, and it was big enough so you could actually do rehearsals for the bigger plays. So then in '65, when they had to find a new place, there was an old community center in a place called Centralia that had never been completed, and for $1 they were able to buy it. And the place was awful. It was terrible. There was no windows and doors. It was covered with vines, and we worked so hard to clean that place up and get it. But then for 30 years, it became a place where the Chamberlayne Players would meet, and they called it the Jerp House. And it was well known as the Jerp House. It was a fascinating little country place, but it had so much character after, a few years of getting the place straight. In 40 years of production, they did 115 plays for the community. 150 plays, almost all at Thomasdale High School. They went to some other high schools because they never had a home of their own. They did countless other performances for civic groups and nursing homes and schools, hundreds of those. So it was a real benefit to the community. And if you can read some of those productions, you will recognize, Blythe's Spirit and My Three Angels is up there. And you'll recognize a bunch of those very well-known plays that they put on. And the kids, many of the kids of those members, and the members grew and grew and grew. The kids, we were ushers, and we did the scut work. And sometimes we get to be in the performance, but most of the performances are mostly adults. Here are a couple little pictures. That's my mom and dad on the left in one of those performances. My mom's on the right. That was Arsenic and a Lace, which was really fun. One of my favorites of all time is Our Town. Our Town was just a wonderful, tear-jerking performance, and I'm the kid in the baseball uniform over there on the right-hand side. Anyway, wonderful, and we had people coming out of the woodwork to see that show. People sometimes ask me, how did the John Rolfe Players last so long? You all know that small theater groups have a tough time staying alive. They come up and they're out and up and out and up and out. These guys lasted over 40 years, and I believe it's for 3 reasons. One, they were meticulous with the business side of a theater group. They maintained really accurate records. I just have a couple of little pictures here, but one on the left shows how attendance grew per season. They tracked attendance very carefully. They tracked who was coming. They tracked where they were from. And they were also really strongly financially oriented because they never wanted to go out of business financially. And on the right-hand side is just one example of what they would do for every play, for every season, and they would do it cumulative from the beginning. And so those are just an example of the pie charts where here's where the money came from, and here's where the money went. And I can remember reading off numbers to my father, who tried to keep it all in this big notebook that he had. but they really paid attention to it, which is why they never were in debt. Think about that. They were never in debt. The very first program, the first show that they had, those 3 one-act plays, it was free to the public, but they asked for donations, and they got $27. And those $27 allowed them enough seed money to put on my 3 and and allowed to pay a little bit for the directors. You know, they were fortunate to have some great directors over the years. Margaret Conley from the Virginia Museum was the first director that they had. And they also had great directors, Kai Wheeler and Del Driver and Al Norris, and people you may have worked with over the years. They were very fortunate for that. Okay, move on.
Oops, I might have messed something up, Brett. I can switch it.
So can you click it?
Yep.
So if you ever wanted to learn all you ever wanted to know, wanted to see all you ever wanted to know about John Rolfe Players Theatre, it is in these 25 4-inch thick scrapbooks at the Chesterfield Central Library. And it really is an amazing to see the progression of this little theater company. And then they have a lot of the playbooks and all the financials and lots and lots of pictures from the shows. And it's really special, really special. So I had said that I thought there were 3 reasons that they were able to be to last so long. A second reason is the social aspect of it. They really nurtured each other, and you know they had by the end I guess they had some certain maybe 32 members, but they had hundreds and hundreds of patrons. The first patron book they did was in 1962. They sold 6 tickets for $6, and you come to any show. So it was the first sort of interesting ticket structure. Kids could come for 50 cents. But the connection between all of the people that were involved with the theater made it really important. I don't know.
Maybe it is going out.
Yep, doesn't do anything to stay on.
Okay.
They believed Brad, they didn't believe you first.
I know. I got a little bit of green, I don't know how it's going to last. I'm going to go for that.
Is the clicker not working anymore?
It just did.
Okay.
The third reason I believe they lasted so long was because they had quality, and they had a dedication to a certain standard of quality that you just normally didn't see in a lot of community theaters. It was terrific, and I think that's one of the keys that kept them, those 3 things. One of the things that they always struggled with was having a home. And you know, when you're in a high school auditorium, you're at the mercy of the high school. Thomas Dale became a magnet school for the performing arts, and so it was tough to get access to that. So from the very beginning, they looked for a permanent home, but they were a nomadic group. They did have a permanent home, but in all of the playbills, you would have a statement sort of like this one. One of our goals is a theater home serving as a center for the performing arts, and building fund has been established for this purpose. And they did. They ended up with about $3,000 in the building fund. Well, after all the years of work and focus, a few years ago, the Perkinson Center for the Arts opened in Chester, Virginia. 325-seat theater, wonderful acoustics, everything that my mom and dad would have been really proud to see. And inside that is a plaque that honors the John Rolfe Players as the sort of initial energy for this theater. It is an amazing place. I love going there. I was just recently there to see Desiree Roots in the Christmas special, and she was terrific, by the way. And I wish that my mom and dad had been able to be there. This was a thing the newspaper did to honor them, talking about theater and the importance of theater and group. And my mom that's her typewriter, the same one, and my dad was hammer. So it's been a great ride. It's been an amazing part of my life, and I thank you for listening. you want to see any dual play those, I've got one right here. Yes, oh yeah, absolutely. Pass them around if you want.
Carol Cass, what was that article?
Oh, yeah, Carol Cass, oh yeah. So interestingly, my mom and dad were friends with Carol Cass and would have lunch with her once every couple of months. And she came to a bunch of the shows. So she was a special human. Steve.
Pick up the mic. Wrong mic.
What?
Wrong mic. Use the one that works. No, like I said, use the one that works.
Yeah.
That one.
That was the one that didn't work.
This one better?
There you go.
I was described as being the archivist for Theatre Virginia.
Hold it closer. Or talk louder.
All right.
Use what you've got.
And the director for this production is?
Thank you.
All right, I'm a volunteer at the museum. And all of this work that I've been doing is just as a volunteer. So, and also, I think what most people are talking about today is the macro story behind their theater. And what I'm going to be talking about is the micro, because I've concentrated on individual pieces of paper, programs, things that have, we have inventories for 50 years worth of production information. But there's still the macro part that I haven't gotten to yet. I mean, I've only been doing this for about 15 years, so it's a slow process. If that looks familiar, that was the theater under construction in the mid-50s.
Leslie Cheek. Leslie?
Yes, the Leslie Cheek Theater.
No, is it Leslie?
Oh, is that Leslie?
Is that Leslie Cheek?
I don't know.
He has a certain proprietary arrow.
Welcome to my house.
That's right, welcome to my house.
Well, the theater at the museum, which was originally the Virginia Museum Theater, because it was a volunteer organization. Nobody was paid. The staff were paid, but the actors, the performers were not paid. That was in 1955. Let's see. That,
My daddy built that.
really?
One of the bricklayers of that.
Wow. And this is the stage. This is what it looked like when it was finished. I assume, is there anybody in this room who never saw a show at the museum?
Oh, so sorry.
Oh.
The last one there was the gin game, that I remember, the gin game.
Yeah.
Well, when I was in high school, I worked on the sets and, painted
Yeah.
things. But the gin game, I think was the last, and Hugh Crumb and Jessica Tandy were in it. I know they were paid. I don't know how long ago that was, but that was an amazing play, and they cursed the whole time, and I thought, well, is that why they stopped theater again? It was something. It really was.
Yeah, I don't remember the details of specific shows, so I don't remember when that production was done. I have one more. If anybody remembers this, this was one of the older new wings of the museum. It's no longer there, but that was the entrance that you used to go into the theater, and then immediately inside that was the box office. This was the first production, High Tour in 1955. That's Mallory Freeman, if anybody remembers his name. He was the first. He uttered the first words on that stage. Oh my. So I have some interesting pictures from the early years. That is Mary Martin. She was there to visit the theater for their production of the Lute Song in 1958. The man who's with her is Ariel Bailiff, who did both. He did the sets, the lights, and the costumes for the show. And he's just showing her some of his illustrations for for that particular production. The next illustrious person, with maybe a small I, is Leo Chichery, who I believe is the one on the right. This was their production of Hamlet in 1964. He was the first actor to be paid, because he was actually brought in from Canada. What's the big?
Stratford.
From Stratford, yes. And died a number of years later in a traffic accident. But this was the kind of thing that they would do. They would set up a gathering in one of the galleries of the museum. In this case, the costumes matched the paintings. And then around 1969, we have, Keith Fowler was brought in as the artistic director. And I don't know if he's in the middle or the one on the right. He's the one in the middle.
The middle.
Yeah. The person on the left is E.G. Marshall, who starred in their production of Macbeth in 1973. Interestingly, I met Keith a few years ago. He had moved, he was living in Southern California teaching at the university. And I went out and met him and did an oral history with him, which was absolutely fascinating because although he was probably 90-ish at the time, he had a mind like a steel trap. If I asked him any question about his time here, he remembered it. And still was in touch with a lot of people that he had worked with here over the years. This one is, I just thought for the point of interest, this is the costume design for Androcles and the Lion, which was done in 1966. Andre Bruce Ward was the designer. And he died a number of years ago, and all of his material went on sale on eBay. And I was able to find that this was happening. And the person who was the archivist at the time, and the two of us each bought a couple of pieces just because that was the only way we could get them. We were outbid for a lot of other things, but somewhere in my files I have information about who those people were that actually bought them, the other ones. So perhaps I'll be able to convince them someday to donate them to the museum. But we have a bunch of his original drawings. And if you can't see it, I mean, that literally is fur up in the left-hand corner. This is sort of the background. I don't have a lot of, like I said, the macro view of the theater because there are files and files called, for better or worse, the administrative files that are in boxes in the attic. Mostly the things that I started with was the production files, the individual files for each production that they put on. And let me see what the next picture is. Okay. I assume everybody is familiar with banker's boxes. If anybody's ever moved, you're familiar with banker's boxes. These are the production files. There are 57 boxes of these. And in most archival situations where an institution has a lot of information and they want to organize it and make it available as quickly as possible, you'll have things like a folder that says correspondence for this particular year. We opted in this collection to actually do this at an item-specific level. So instead of a folder that says just correspondence, I have listed every single item in the folder, the letter, who it was from, who it was to, what the date was. And that continued with all of the work that I've done, that everything is at an item-specific level and searchable at that level. So it's why it's taken me 15 years to get around to thinking about the macro. I just took this picture the other day just to show you what it looks like in the archives. This is a box that has slides in it. We have 23 boxes like that.
Thank you for your work.
Well, it was fascinating because I was an attendee at the theater from probably the last 20 years of its existence. And I just happened to be working at the museum as a volunteer doing other things when they said, would you be interested in taking on this project? And I thought, okay.
Wow, can't dance, might as well.
Right, exactly. And it has given me a golden opportunity to meet all sorts of people who worked there, who had some connection with the theater and its history. I told you 23 of these boxes. There are 12 boxes of photographs, 5 boxes of just headshots, 2 boxes of flat plans, plans for sets that are just flat. We have another boxes and boxes full of the rolled up ones that we haven't even dealt with yet. There are 3 boxes of the Dress Circle records. The Dress Circle was the kind of support organization, and they had a big gala event every year for a number of years, big fundraiser. 3 boxes of New Voices. Remember New Voices, which is still in existence. And then there's a lot of material that, like I said, hasn't been done yet. The rolled up plans that I have to deal with. Special events, things that took place in the theater but weren't specifically part of the main stage productions. The overall history of the theater. I found a few documents in the process of gathering this material together and realized that's something that needs to be done. It needs to be accounted for in the archives. And like I said, the administrative files and the actual history. So that's basically what I've been doing, and this is the materials that I've had to work with. We've had a lot of people have come and gone in the library during those years. The person who was the archivist when I first started this and was kind of my mentor because she basically taught me what I was supposed to be doing. I'm a librarian by training, but had no experience with archival work. And she basically taught me what I needed to do, and whenever there was a question about, well, how do we handle this, we would talk about it, and she would tell me what to do. She left a year, maybe 2 years ago. But the good news is, and I just found this out this week, that they have posted the position, have narrowed it down to a number of people that they're going to consider, and the first person who's going to be interviewed comes in next week. So I'm hoping that at some point there will be somebody to pass the buck to, because every once in a while I come up with a question and I don't know the answer, and Courtney's gone. So now there's going to be a new guinea pig. I think that's it.
And I thought the scrapbooks were cool.
Do you think the theater will ever start back up again? Do they talk about it?
The question comes up all the time.
They just don't do it.
The space has been used
Yeah.
for theater productions in recent years, sporadically.
But it's about to be, it's been transformed now as a ballet
I know
venue.
mine's in motion, right?
Yeah.
No, all ballet. So ballet's going to put they're going to do a lot of their bigger shows there. They had to widen the proscenium and do a bunch of work to it, but it's now going to be a ballet.
Yeah, it's interesting. I haven't actually been in the theater in a while. When I first started this, all of the production files were actually in the booth at the back of the theater, and that's where I worked. And at some point, when one of the expansions was going on, we had to move. So during the course of these number of years, I've had 5 different locations where these boxes have been moved. So now I'm based in the library, in the archives, which is within the library. But I'm anxious to see what the new theater, what the old theater looks like.
Do you still have that collection? I probably shouldn't bring this up, but when it was an equity theater, the theater was allowed to make archival copies, video copies. I don't
Yes.
think you can view them or anything, but you
No.
did have
We have them. Courtney, the former archivist, actually organized them. There are legal issues as to whether or not we can show them, because they are technically the property of the actors. So that's sort of in the back of our minds that, yes, we would love to be able to do something with them. We'd love to be able to have them available for viewing, but there's not a physical space for it. And it would require a fairly hefty investment of money, and the archives have never been particularly high on anybody's list of priorities at the museum. So,
If there are other questions, I'm going to ask you to hold them to the end because Charles needs to go and he needs to leave a little bit early. So we're going to have a Q&A time for everybody to ask their questions at the very end.
Yeah, it's kind of funny actually. You saw me step out a moment ago. That's because my son was calling me because my English students couldn't get into their midpoint assessment. That's just now, so I was like, on the computer, like, okay, publish again, please. All right. So anyway, so my name is Charles Drax. I am the current president of the board at Chamberlayne Actors Theatre, yeah, when Emily introduced everybody up here as Trailblazers, wow, that really inspired my imposter syndrome there. Because though Chamberlain's story is long, it's not, mine is not nearly as long as Chamberlain's. So I'll get into that in a little bit. But for those of you who are not familiar with Chamberlain, and by the way, thank you, Emily, for bringing up some pictures. I'm not sure which pictures are on here because I didn't necessarily prepare this as a PowerPoint per se. But the North Henrico Civic Association, the North Chamberlain Civic Association building, as it was known back then, it is now known as the North Henrico Civic Association building, was a neighborhood meeting space. And so a group of neighbors decided to get together in the spring of '64 and put together a theater company that was mainly meant to entertain folks from that area, from Northern Henrico. And so this was very much a community theater. And has anybody ever visited that space while we were operating there? Yeah. So it's a very nice space. It's got some interesting quirks to it for sure. If you've never been there, I'm not sure if there are any interior shots of this or not. No, that's just a rehearsal tomorrow.
That was a board meeting.
Yeah, exactly, right? So wait, that's my planning session. No, but if you've never been there, this building, when you go into that main entrance that you see in the front there, you have space for about 100 to 150 chairs. And then there is a built-in small proscenium or an almost black box type of theater that's in there. And so Chamberlain over the years kind of built that out. So bringing in platforms and flats and built it out into a thrust style stage that was there for many, many years. So in 1999, John Ambrose, who was the president of the board back then, and a good friend I've worked with a number of times, they decided at that point, we're going to make a little transition and not just be a community theater, but also start paying our actors. Again, not paying very much, because that's the economics of a small theater. But yeah, and so we started making that push into professional work. This is where my story sort of comes in with Chamberlain, because my first time working with them was when I was in college. And I auditioned for 12 Angry Men, and got in as juror number 6. It was the first show that I ever got to do with them. And it was kind of interesting because the director, I don't know if any of you remember Jay McCullough, loved him. And he staged that as an arena style production, as opposed to the thrust style stage. And so the space there was able to lend itself to different types of production, and so we very much appreciated that. As I spoke of college earlier, my final design project for scene design was to actually make a set of the backstage of Chamberlayne Actors Theatre. So I still have it like sitting in my house right now. There's a little scale model of that little room back there that has 5 changing cubbies, a couch in the corner, a makeup mirror with a countertop, and that's about it. And I have worked with shows in that building where we had 5 people, and I've worked at shows where we had 17 people in the cast, and it's quite an adventure getting everybody into that space. things went along fairly well, and we get to, I believe, around 2018 or so, and a number of you may remember that, you know, I was actually, fun fact, I was sitting in an emergency room, and they, we won't get into why, but, and my wife, you know, pulls up a thing and says, wait, Chamberlayne's closing? What? Yeah, and I'm, wait, what happened? And so if any of you were around for that and attended the town hall that happened shortly after that, you know, they reached a point where just financially trying to keep up with everything, as well as volunteers and trying to get people to work on the board at Chamberlayne, it, you know, was kind of like, hey, we gotta have an all hands on deck thing here, or else this theater that's been with us for decades might go away. I went to that meeting, and you know, I approached the board president at the time, Kelly St. Clair, and said, you know, if you need more help, I mean, I've been kind of busy with a lot of stuff at Acton High School for a while, but you know, this is a place that I send my students to. I had a student named Diego Salinas, who is now a full-time working actor, and he was part of a production called The Joshua Tree. And he actually got one of the earliest artsies as a newcomer of the year for that role. And so it's like, this is a great place to send my students. It is literally just down the road from Acton High School. I think the only school that might be closer is maybe Henrico as far as the high schools, right? So I was like, we can't let this go away. So I joined the board, a number of other new people joined the board, and we started pulling things out, and we were producing a 5-show season. And then, well, if there are fans of animated series, and then the Fire Nation attacked. Some people got hurt, that's okay, good. Bear with me, I'm used to like making jokes that teenagers will go with, and so, no, then the pandemic hit, right? And so, you know, just like so many others, we were shuttered, and so we could not do productions for about 18 months. And, you know, we did our best, and the Civic Association did their best. But eventually we just came to the determination that if we paid the rent on this building for 18 months while dark, we would have nothing left to be able to mount a season later on. So we vacated the building, we brought out our platforms and our props and our pieces, and we became the Stray Cats. If you've ever been to one of our productions, we literally rebranded ourselves as the Stray Cats, and we went to various locations. We went to of course, at the high school where I teach, so it's like, you know, the high schools, just like we said, that's a major resource for local companies, especially smaller companies. One of our board members is Terry Sullivan, who is the lead over at Bright Point's theater program in Chesterfield. And so we did some shows at Bright Point. If anybody remembers Dogtown Dance Theater, we did some work there. That was such a nice space. The Ashland Arts and Activity Center was very kind to us, and so fast forward to this past summer, and we're thinking about, okay, we're putting together our season, but of course, before we put together a season, we've got to know where we're going, right? So we're starting to contact different places and figure out where we're going to go, and we get contacted by David Deal over at Hanover Tavern, and he says, hey, you know, we've had some space open up at the tavern in our season, and we heard that you guys, you know, kind of on tour, that sort of thing, which is great that he heard that we were on tour and such, because a lot of times when I mention that I'm president of Chamberlayne Actors Theatre, I hear, Chamberlayne? I thought it was gone. What? Yes. And so to hear this opportunity come up, that we could mount a full season at the tavern, was way too good to pass up. Not that we even have a reason to pass it up. So we made this deal, no pun intended to David, that's his last name, Deal, but you know. But yeah, and so this past fall we opened up with painting churches at the tavern and had a wonderful opening. And so even though the spring of 1964 is when we technically probably should have celebrated the 60th anniversary, we have chosen to kind of use this time of renewal as a chance to celebrate 60 years of history of CAT. And so at the closing night of Painting Churches, we had bunches and bunches, I'm not, all right, it sounds like I'm not trying to compete, I'm just saying, we had about 5 albums worth of programs that had been curated. Lynn Keith, Charlotte Sharp, any of you know them, they've been with the company for literally decades, and just had a ton of stuff that we could put out for the reception here. And we will be doing that for our subsequent productions as well. And we do have another bit of a plan to celebrate some anniversaries as well. I don't know if we're ready to discuss that yet. So with Proof happening when it is, we are also going to be this is where the whole Platinum Jubilee comes in. So celebrating the sort of birth of Barksdale, because that is the building, if you remember, from where we started our presentations. Wow, it's almost like you planned this, right? I know. It's like poetry. It rhymes. Anyway, so yeah. But to not only celebrate our arrival there, but to celebrate what Muriel and all the rest did way back then to start theater in that building. And so we'll be doing a spaghetti dinner, sort of celebrating that portion of it, followed by a performance of Proof that evening. And I think we ended up aiming for the 7th.
It's the 15th.
The 15th.
February 15th at the Tavern.
Yes. And so we'd love for you to join us for that. If you can't join us for that, please come join us for Proof, and we'll have some of this history on display there as well. And we will probably do a small reception at the end of the run as well. It was a lot of fun to see some folks who hadn't come and joined Chamberlayne. And while, again, some people have looked at us and said, wow, you guys are still around? And it's way too easy to make the joke about the 9 lives, right? As far as Harry wrote that article about the many lives of CAT, right? So if any of you saw that. But we are very excited to continue this tradition, and as well as we're celebrating the history of what has gone before, we're also looking to the future to continue with, as Atlas says, with partnerships, right? Partnerships are a big part of what we've done and what we will continue to do. So I think I've hammered on enough.
Thank you. A few minutes for questions. If anybody has a question out here, I'll bring a mic to you so our folks on Zoom can hear the questions. I saw a hand up earlier. I don't remember where that was. Did the question get answered? Yeah. Let me bring you up. Can you talk loud? For the folks on
The museum theater, is it completely done now, or when, does anybody know when it will be done?
The renovations on the theater, or to make it usable by the
Last time I heard they were
ballet?
still building on it, and I wondered if they ever finished it.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, because the ballet's going in. And I don't know the answer. I haven't even ventured into that part of the building lately.
I believe it is this spring. I think they're going to have
They
it
are not
first.
finished yet.
Okay, thanks.
Any other questions? I have a couple if nobody has them, but I want to give you all a chance. I actually wanted to ask a question about integration of audiences in Richmond and in our theaters. Just in light of when all of these theaters were founded and Jim Crow laws were very much in effect at that time, how did these theaters handle integration in their audiences, or did they? I mean, at what point did that?
In all of the Jim Crow laws did not become off the books. They were not canceled until 1965. So Barksdale started performing in '54, and one of the first things that they decided to do was to have an integrated audience, which was absolutely positively against the law. So Muriel and Macaulay and Pete Kilgore went to Virginia Union University and spoke with the president and said, how would you feel about getting together a group of very courageous students and professors who can come on a bus to attend our first production, Gold in the Hills, And they said yes. And so their next step was to make sure that the word got out to the sheriff's office of Hanover Tavern, which is literally across the street. And Muriel, as she used to tell the story, would say, we were sitting in the theater one day about a week before the performance where the Virginia Union folks were going to come, 40 of them, and there was a knock on the door. And we went and opened the door, and it was the sheriff. And he said, I think what you New Yorkers have been doing down here is just wonderful. You have done such a great job of repairing the building and getting it so that we can come back into it without fear of it collapsing around our ears. But I just learned that you are planning to welcome a group from Virginia Union University to come see your play, Gold in the Hills. And Muriel said, I'm so glad you heard about that. Yes. We are doing that. And if you ever knew Muriel McCauley, who was the word chain smoker was invented. She said, I'm so glad you heard about it. Yes, we are planning to do that, and we would love to have you join the audience on that night. And the sheriff said, you guys are great, but you're from New York and you don't know how things work down here. In Virginia, it is literally against the law, and if you have black people and white people sitting in your theater, and this is God's truth here, to attend this performance, I'm going to have to come over and arrest everyone. And Muriel said, well, let me get you a flyer. Here is the date of the show. I'll circle the day. You know where to find it. It's happening, and we are excited. So for the next week, everyone was on pins and needles and thinking that the sheriff was going to bring in all the deputies and come over and arrest the 40 from Virginia Union and the 10 or 12 who worked at the theater. And on the day of, everybody was waiting. And the bus came. And they walked into the theater. And the rest of the audience, all white, came. And they sat there completely intermingled, side by side. And they watched the entire performance in 1954 of Gold in the Hills. They loved the show, gave it a huge ovation. Then everybody went out to the parking lot, happy as could be, got in their respective vehicles, drove away, and nothing happened. And with that performance in 1954, people say, what does theater do for communities, really? You know, well, this is one of the things that theater did for the Commonwealth of Virginia, is they broke the back of the Jim Crow laws, and everything turned out just fine. And that is one of the things that Barksdale is extremely proud of, and that all of us who support Richmond Theater should be proud of. I regret that the first black performer on a Richmond stage, I think, was Beat Bush, and You Can't Take It With You, at Virginia Museum Theater, which was still several years away.
It was 1966.
66. So from 54 to 66, because the laws were on the books till 65. 66, Beat Bush played a maid. And You Can't Take It With You at Virginia Museum Theater, and then everything changed. And so there have been multiracial casts everywhere since then. But the first audience was at Barksdale in 54.
Question.
Yes, my name is Gary Flowers, and I'd like to first say that Bee Bush was one of my teachers at Thomas Jefferson High School.
There you go.
I love her to death. I'd like to posit something for you all to ponder. Yesterday was Dr. King's birth date. We'll celebrate it next Monday. But 51 years before Mrs. Parks and Dr. King executed a bus boycott in Montgomery, Alabama, Mrs. Maggie Walker and Mr. John Mitchell executed a trolley car boycott here in Richmond, Virginia. It was the predicate. Now, everyone should have learned that in public school. I didn't learn it in an all-black public school system in Richmond. And that is prescient to national history.
Yes.
That is germane to Richmond. And so I'd like to posit that for you all to ponder. Someone make a production.
We're going to run with that. And we'll
Well, let me, I have,
Yeah.
I'm glad you brought that up about the production of the theater, because I looked it up. Bob Telford, who some of you might remember, was the first serious artistic director at the museum. He started in 1958 and left in 1966, and the last production that he was part of, he also acted in, and it was that production, so you can't take it with you. And we had a lot of conversations with Bob in the years before he died, and he was very supportive of the work that we were doing. One of the things that he was most proud of was that he integrated the stage there. And it was not just the woman you mentioned, but there was also a man who played, I think, the butler.
Yeah, and Carl Lester and Bee Bush did those roles again at the Tavern, but I'm not sure, I don't think Carl Lester did it at Virginia Museum Theatre. Yeah.
But there was a black man, I just don't recall his name.
I can add just one comment to this, because in a little town called Chester, you know, there was a lot of segregation still happening. My parents were both from the Midwest, and they could never understand that. And they tried and tried to build the audience, a wider audience, but what they found was that the audience was reluctant because of just the history. And when they finally added African Americans to the cast, is when, like you said, the dam broke, and all the people started coming, and all of a sudden, everything was okay. But it took a while. It took until the 60s, so that's, 10 years of, I think the first 10 years of this, they were all Caucasian folks, I think.
Any other questions that folks might have? Harry.
I wanted about Keith Fowler, the controversial Keith Fowler. Late, and unfortunately late and controversial Keith Fowler. After he left Virginia Museum Theatre, he started the American Rebels Company in the old Empire. They had, I think, 1 year. And the city council gave them $50,000, which if that happened today, man, they'd be burning the place down. But there was a belief that this old building needed life, and so I just don't know if anybody could address that period right in there in the mid-70s, because
It was the American Rebels Company, and it was started by not just Keith, but Betty Osborne and Bill, taught at U of R.
Lockie?
No.
Smith?
Bill Smith. Bill Smith.
William Stansel Smith.
Yeah, William Stansel Smith. And
now that's a name.
And Marie Goodman Hunter.
Okay, yeah.
We are, and they started American Rebels, and it lasted for almost 2 full seasons. It ended right before the end of its 2nd season. The biggest issue they had was the heat. It was cold as a witch's refrigerator. And you would go and you would just freeze. And they didn't own the building. They couldn't raise the money. to heat the building, but when Theater 4 bought the building in '86, we knew, because we had attended American Rebels, that it was cold in there.
You sit on your feet.
Yeah, the first thing we did was restore the heat before we restored anything else in the building, and that's what made it habitable as a theater space.
I ran lights with gloves.
Yes.
You had to jump over puddles to get to the stage. And it was hard when you were only wearing a fishtail. There's a story there.
Well, thank you. Stage lights did
It
not
wasn't
come up
up
with
there.
stage lights.
No.
I did 3 shows during the 6 seasons.
Yeah,
Dressing rooms.
yeah, it was freezing.
Any other comments, questions?
I have one.
Oh, yep.
Just my involvement in all of this is kind of superfluous and coloring, but after my experiences with Harry at Barksdale Theatre and Carol and then Fifth Wall, listening to all of these itinerant theaters, these theaters who had no home, because when we had no home, it's very difficult to keep life going in theater, and I commend anything that keeps it going. It's hard, and now seeing that there's all these other theaters who had no space, and you're constantly looking for a place that it doesn't work for one reason or another, or you have it for 5 minutes and then it's gone.
People don't know how difficult it is to run a nonprofit theater on a break-even basis until you've done it.
Amen.
And then you have so much respect for the people who do
Yeah.
manage to keep the lights on and keep places, seats for people to come and experience.
And new people come in and they go, oh, we'll just have a few hits, and that'll take care of everything.
And why do you need to pay actors? They're doing it for love.
It's extremely difficult.
It looks good on the resume.
Right.
Question?
I know, I'd like to actually make a comment.
Yes, comment.
Charles Wax, who's left us now, but was being very modest. He and his board, and the support of you guys at Virginia Rep, turned an operation. I actually led them on a strategic planning process, and quite frankly, I thought I was walking in, they were going to be a disaster. It turned out to be a well-run organization with the same kind of accounting that you had experienced with your folks at John Rolfe. But the accounting was all over the place, and when they all brought it together in one place, this had been a theater in the black until 1 year. And all of a sudden they had a $15,000 debt, and they were like, oh my God, what do we do? And literally, Charles and his board, in 1 year, turned around, and then, of course, what they've done post-COVID. He was very, very modest, but he and his board deserve a great deal of credit for saving an institution.
Yeah.
And once again, thank you all for the support that you gave them to solidify themselves at that time.
We believe that you don't throw away theater institutions. And you can have 1 bad year, 2 bad years. You don't go, oh, well, that's it then. We're shutting down. So, yeah, we went in and guaranteed the lease for Chamberlayne for 2 years. Because
The homeowners association was being off.
yeah, somebody had to do it, and we did it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, they did.
Oh, there's a question back there.
I think I have a question. In 2020, I was fortunate enough to participate in a theatrical performance with the Richmond Symphony at the Big Ten event down in Maymont. So I was wondering, with the Richmond Symphony, is there any hopes of doing like utilization of the Dominion Energy Center, or if there are any mergers or anything happening that they could utilize and probably piggyback off of each other with theater?
Bev Appleton, who's sitting right here, has been in conversations with the Richmond Symphony to do a revival of a show that was done how many years ago? Every Good Boy Deserves Favor?
1998.
In 1998, the production company, I think, one of Bev's companies, and the symphony did Every Good Boy Deserves Favor with the symphony and with actors. And it was very successful. So I know he is trying to revive that with the symphony, but that's all that I know about the symphony trying to get back into theater. But that may or may not wind up being in the works. Thank you.
Well, let's have another round of applause. Again, to the Henrico County Public Library, we have Lindsay and Larry back there who are just fabulous, so please give them a you all got enough to eat and enough to drink, and please, I hope that you'll put the next iteration of Coffee and Conversations on your calendar. It's April 17th. Our topic for discussion for that event will be the new musical Gabriel, which had its original development at Firehouse Theatre and was produced a few years ago, I think in 2022. And Atlas Partnership is taking that on to do the professional premiere at Hanover Tavern this fall. So please join us for that same time, same place, April 17th for Gabriel.
And grab them up on the way out.
Grab them up on the way out.